It's mid-July in 2026, and most media and most buyers think that the entire San Francisco Bay Area real estate market is out of control. For single-family homes in San Francisco, that's absolutely the case for the majority of neighborhoods, not 100% of them. And outside of location throughout the Bay Area, there's also asset type. These define many real estate markets within the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm Katie Pratt. I'm a realtor in the San Francisco Bay Area. I represent both sellers and buyers, and I help them go through this process in an analytical way. I've been doing this since 2015. Today, I'm breaking down what buyers should look for if looking for a motivated seller. What are those 10 signs that show a seller may be willing to make concessions or reduce their price? These signs of motivation might show up as specific patterns in the way the property is listed, the timing, the presentation, some other things that you might not be able to see as the consumer. Stick around for sign number 1. Counting backwards from 10, sign number 10, the property has new listing photos after it's already been on market for a few weeks. New angles, better lighting. There's some other modifications the seller could have made mid-listing to make it more warm for a new buyer. If the seller was in a rush to get the home on the market, or the seller didn't listen to the listing agent about initial impressions and professional photography when it comes to fresh photos. This is like also assuming that no other internal modifications to the property to make it more marketable have been changed. I still say it's a good sign when photographs have been taken on someone's cell phone. Perhaps the property is bank owned, an REO, real estate owned property, or it's in probate, or the listing agent has enormous volume because they work for an asset manager, and the time that listing agent has to take on that property is very little and wants to push the property to get sold as quickly as possible. There are definitely advantages of bad presentation for you, the buyer. There are also instances where professional photography maybe didn't hit the mark, didn't showcase a part of the property that is a special feature and would contribute to a higher value in that area in which it's listed. Some of the things I've seen before are layout being unclear. Perhaps it's not just about the photos, but it's about floor plan, having Matterport, or having some sort of video walkthrough so the buyer can get a better sense of the property or that special feature. The listing agent wasn't around when the photos were taken, and there are terrible angles of the backyard, not showcasing how large it is, maybe showcasing too much of a bad feature, cement wall that hasn't been painted in over 20 years instead of the redwood trees in the back. Professional photography, Matterport, floor plans, more detailed floor plans, all of those can indicate that there wasn't as much attention as desired or anticipated by that listing in its early stages of being listed. Sign number 9, related to sign number 10. The new photography might show new staging mid-listing. Here are a couple of things I always tell sellers when they're presenting their property or they're talking about what improvements will have the biggest return on their investment when listing. Number 1, outside of making sure the property is clean, if you could do nothing else than stage the property. Why? Many buyers have little imagination. And yes, staging tends to be minimalistic. It's relatively expensive, especially in the Bay Area, where you can spend anywhere between $5,000 and $20,000, depending on the size of the space and a category of staging, whether it's day-to-day, mid-century specialist, luxury, those are more expensive. I think if you see this mid-listing, that stagings happen without the property being removed from the market for at least 30 days and then re-entered into the MLS, I think that's a mistake on the seller. I think if you're going to restage, take the property off for 30 days, let it reset on the multiple listing service so that when it comes on, it looks like a new listing. Having a dramatic change in the presentation of the property, redoing photos, all of that should come with time off market so it resets and looks new to the end users. So anyway, it can be an opportunity for you as a buyer if the seller for some reason decided you're going to make those changes, upload new photos mid-listing. So when I say I recommend staging, that's the minimum you should do. There are exceptions. So homes that are in extremely bad condition, clearly have bigger issues, drywall falling apart, mildew, mold on ceilings, because the seller might be in a rush, cannot be amended. It's just not worth it to put your money there. It's going to be what it's going to be. What I want to make abundantly clear to sellers is that virtual staging does not have the same effect as does real staging, because it might get buyers in the door, but buyers are more likely to remain in a property that is staged for something like 15 to 20 minutes on average. This is a nationwide data, than in a property that is not staged. In addition to that, any sort of virtually modified image has to be disclosed at the bottom of the photo, which takes someone's eye away from the house. It's nice to see the before and after sometimes and the possibilities. There are these tools that help buyers have better imaginations, re-envisioning the space. But again, the experience of being at the home in person will feel very different than what they saw online. Sign number 8. This is multiple price reductions in small increments. What this indicates to me is, well, one of two things. You have a very stubborn seller who might not have taken the pricing strategy advice of the realtor from the beginning beginning. And it can also mean that that particular neighborhood or city is experiencing depreciation and the seller was not prepped for that. Neither was the realtor. But each time there's a price cut, it indicates, especially if the pricing strategy in that neighborhood or more likely city is more transparent, that price point isn't attracting any buyers. Open houses have perhaps been very slow. There are certain luxury markets in the Bay Area where this is the case, where you start out with more transparent pricing. We sometimes call it aspirational pricing, depending on the market data. If you have a home that was on the market last year and then relisted, it might serve you as a seller to start far below what you think the property will sell for. So at least in that situation, you can get more feet through the door, more people interested. So the possibility of having multiple offers is higher. Everything I've mentioned before, how do you track for it? You'll have some sort of collaboration center where you can track your favorites. If they get taken off the market and relisted, you'll see them appear again as new. You'll see the expired or withdrawn status on ones that you've been interested in. For the multiple price reductions, you should receive notifications every time that happens. Where are these most likely happening in the Bay Area right now? In Oakland, for example, which is huge geographically and hard to generalize because of its many micro markets, we have seen an increase in price reductions in many neighborhoods in Oakland. So I'm not going to get super granular about that in this video, but in my next one, I cover a tale of many markets in different cities in the Bay Area where there's still opportunity for buyers and where there should be warning to sellers. In all of Alameda County, the median sold price for single family homes fell over 5% year over year. I imagine some price reductions or stagnation has occurred in some of the unincorporated areas like San Lorenzo, Cherryland, some neighborhoods in Hayward, I would presume. Castro Valley, I'd expect to see some stagnation. San Leandro, still some stagnation. Median home values still haven't recovered to what they were in 2021, 2022. Sellers, if your house is already in an area of the Bay Area that's experiencing depreciation, do not lean towards a listing or a pricing strategy that goes against the grain of what's typical. So if you're listing in the East Bay, certain parts of the East Bay like Berkeley, Oakland, El Cerrito, Albany, do not list at aspirational pricing from the beginning. That's a big no-no. Those buyers coming in from the peninsula and other parts of the Bay Area, nothing is transparently priced in the East Bay. If it is, your realtor might see that. If it's not in public remarks, it'll be in private remarks. That might be a signal. In addition to multiple price reductions, or even with one price reduction, the opposite of a price reduction might be a move towards transparent pricing. Where do you find this? Sometimes it's in public remarks. So you can do a keyword search for transparent pricing. The list price, what the price displayed, is what the seller will take in that moment in time. Oftentimes when that happens, you have very little time to move on it, but also it can mean that there's still some room for negotiation down from that price. Sometimes you'll see that in the confidential remarks. Anyway, look for transparent pricing and look for homes that have multiple price cuts and small increments. And sellers, again, you can reset the listing by taking it off the MLS for 30 days and putting it back on. Put it back on at the listing pricing strategy that is conventional for the area. Or if you are in a higher price point area that's experiencing depreciation, think about what pricing might get a lot of eyes on the property and it happens to also be far below what you think the property will sell for. So at least in that situation, you can get more feet through the door, more people interested. So the possibility of having multiple offers is higher. All right, slide number 7. There's specific mention of the seller's willingness to make concessions in the public remarks and also private remarks. So what are concessions? I'm not talking about the buyer agent commission, although that could apply, but generally the distinction is concessions are a seller's willingness to give the buyer credits to do a rate buy down, to do inspections if they haven't done inspections, to cover, in the case of condos, townhomes that have special assessments on their HOAs, to cover those special assessments. Sometimes sellers, they do know what they net ultimately in the sale of a home when they make certain concessions. Sometimes there is a little bit of ego involved in getting a certain number. And so while they might not net as much as they would if they didn't give concessions, they get a number that was something they envisioned when they first listed the property. You as the buyer should be concerned about, if that is a big differential, what the county is going to value your home as, if they're going to use that sale price as an indication of valuation, because then your property taxes would be higher slightly. Your city transfer tax is a factor in that home sale price. So you want to make sure too, if the seller wants more and that's over one of the tiers of city transfer tax increasing, the increase in city transfer tax would offset for both you, the buyer, and the seller, the benefit of you getting getting some concession. But on that note, and again, you can do a keyword search, your realtor can do a keyword search for you for that terminology in the listing on the MLS, if it's in confidential remarks. And then you can see on public remarks for consumer facing sites or your collaboration center from the multiple listing service, those specific terms. So seller concessions, seller is willing to make concessions. Oftentimes the amount of money that can be contributed by the seller for the buyer is up to 6% of the loan amount. Sometimes the impact, a lot of times for reasons that someone who doesn't work on the back end of mortgage financing doesn't understand, the seller's contribution to your interest rate has a bigger impact than would that money coming from you, the buyer. So far, I've been talking about signals that I can set up searches for in terms of price reductions, confidential remarks, public remark keyword searches. If you'd like a list like that, but don't know what location you should target first because you're relocating to the Bay Area or you're relocating to San Francisco, there is a Bay Area generic relocation guide. It's pretty extensive in terms of the number of cities that it includes and areas of the Bay. On that note, sign number 6 is that the seller's offering rate buy downs in the confidential remarks on the MLS or in the public remarks. And a high price area like the San Francisco Bay Area, the impact of these credits on monthly payments is high. And under sign number 6, I will also include seller financing. The 30-year fixed mortgage rate at the beginning of August 2026 is around, well, it's almost 7%. You might get lower rates of 6.75% with conventional FHA financing. Then you have mortgage insurance. Point being, that's definitely slowed buyer activity at certain price points for folks who aren't using majority cash, who aren't using their vested interest in their companies, the companies in which they work for. So when interest rates jumped rapidly from 3.5% to over 5% was to incentivize buyers to get back into the home buying game by offering this program. And in this program, there's something called a 3-2-1 buy down and a 2-1 buy down. And there might be a 4-3-2-1 buy down. But the hope was that by the time the program, the rate buy down program is over after you've purchased, the interest rates would be back to a level that was equivalent to or lower than one of the years of buy down. So in the case of a 6.75% interest rate now, if a seller is willing to contribute, let's say, I don't know what the exact amount would be, but $40,000 towards the interest rate buy down, then year 1 of that 3-2-1 buy down will be 3% interest rate reduction. So you're back at 3.75%. Year 2, 4.75%. Year 3, 5.75%, which is still lower. I mean, we hope that rates will be sub 5.5 in a year or two. Is this a realistic program to use? Absolutely. When I was on the listing side in one of these, I guess, stagnation and depreciating neighborhoods, getting the price that we wanted meant that we would have to make a concession for the buyer. And we did a 2-1 buy down. I believe that $25,000 on a $1.1 million purchase, even with 10% down, it's saved the buyer at least $1,000 a month. With seller financing, when does this benefit you? When the seller is absolutely willing to finance a huge part of the purchase. Oftentimes it doesn't work for people who are anticipating using FHA or VA loans because you're using a low down payment program. The seller is going to expect a bigger chunk of change deposited as part of the seller finance deal, typically. But if you see this, and it is very rare, so it is something you can also offer if, again, their price point is too high for the interest rate that's available to you through conventional loans. I would refer you to a real estate attorney to review all contracts. When a seller is a mortgager or is expecting to be a mortgager, it would also indicate that something is wrong with the house where you couldn't get financing. But I would expect to see the seller offer up some solutions that keep the home from being financed, like not having a heating source, not putting in carbon monoxide smoke detectors, clearing some of the pest wood destroying organisms. Or maybe if the seller wants to delay a big capital gain, doesn't want to complete a 1031 exchange for the time being. There could be other motivations that make the seller want to offer seller financing in the moment. Sign number 5, this also falls in the category of seller concessions and mentions of those in the confidential remarks or the public remarks, but that's seller making concessions to pay special assessments for the HOA transfer fees, home warranties. That's something very rarely I see a seller offer to pay. There's always work with a home warranty as a buyer, so I don't see that as a big plus, but I'm talking about indications of a seller's willingness to negotiate and something being less competitive for you as the buyer. The special assessment thing for HOAs can be huge because this can be purchase prohibitive for many buyers. And what is this caused by? As I've mentioned in other videos, whether it's in Lakeshore of Oakland, some of the hills in Sequoia View and Skyline Boulevard where there are townhomes, HOA prices have gone up significantly over over 26% between 2019 and 2025, maybe a little bit more. Part of that is due to either spreading out an anticipated big cost that has to do with balcony replacement. There's a state Senate bill that requires certain safety measures and improvements for balconies on buildings. Could have to do with the required update for electrical within the building so that their insurance premiums can go down. So you're offsetting the cost of an inflated insurance premium for not having updated electrical by having to come up with the money to update the electrical. Updating roofs and high fire severity or proximity to high fire severity zones. Soft story retrofit. There are a lot of reasons that special assessments can take place or HOA fees can increase drastically. So it makes sense to me that if a seller's just trying to get out more than they're trying not to lose that much money, then they will offer these types of concessions. Warranties are hit or miss, which is why I described them in the way that I did. But if you do have outdated appliances in your 1980s, 1990 condo and you're offering this, then, if something breaks, it's highly unlikely that a replacement part can be found. The home warranty is going to give the new homeowner a check for replacement. That's not without doing some work. The quality of the home warranties, the responsiveness, the response times, it sometimes depends on the time of year, and of course the company itself and the sales rep that communicates directly with us real estate agents. Number 3, there are extended closing timelines offered, or the seller wants to remain in possession after the close of escrow, aka that home is owner occupied. Standard finance sales in California take anywhere from, a lot of my mortgage brokers are able to close between 12 days and 18 to 21 days. Not the typical 30 to 45 days. You're using other types of loan products like the VA or FHA. It might be a little bit longer. But with cash sales, of course, that's 7 to 14 days. Hard money loans depends on the hard money lender and what information they have in the beginning. So what are the reasons that a seller might ask for an extended close of escrow? Well, number 1, we have a much faster close of escrow median time period to close in the Bay Area probably than anywhere else in the country or many parts of the country. And then there are some homeowners ready to downsize where they want to utilize Prop 19. They have to find something where they can transfer their tax basis from Prop 13 into their new home. There are limited increases when they decide to downsize, but their budget increases. So I'm curious as to what percentage of sellers this actually is. It was meant to incentivize there to be more movement in the market, and I'm not sure how effective this has been. There's also just the reality of a lot of boomers downsizing to or having to move because of their need for assisted living care. In both of these cases, the coordination of the sale and purchase of a new property, especially when there's a limited budget, requires that they need a little bit more time to either identify where they're going to be next, clear out the property, just prep for sale. It's a very emotional, especially if these are sellers who have been in their homes for decades, very emotional transition for them. So the extra time is well worth the concession, what might ultimately be a leverage point for you as a buyer, giving them more time without any type of seller in possession fee. So one option is you can give sellers more time after close of escrow. That's not longer than 29 days. Otherwise, it's considered a tenancy in the state of California. You can hold a deposit back if you need to for clearing out any items. But if you were to not charge them for the first month of time that they're there past the close of escrow, well, you can use that as leverage to come in with a lower price. It's a new term in your offer that doesn't exist for sellers who don't have this issue. The other reality is that some of these sellers who are asking for time to remain in possession after close of escrow might have been rushed into a sale. There could have been financial distress in the family, foreclosure in the horizon. When that's the case, like having the seller remain in possession before it's foreclosed upon could be fine as long as they have more work to do, especially if it's a short sale in terms of collecting relocation assistance money from the bank. Actually, there might not be any relocation assistance from the bank. So there's even more preparation and finding, using the overages from the sale, if there are any, to make their next transition. So we didn't really talk about motivated sellers in the sense that they might be in a distressed financial situation. But when those things become public in the Bay Area or even semi-public because of delayed mortgage payments, things in pre-foreclosure now on these consumer-facing sites, these poor sellers are overwhelmed with mail, unsolicited phone calls. It's best not to think of that even as an opportunity as a buyer. In those cases as well, if they're not able to delay something like a foreclosure, then they're probably going to be a cash buyer in the end who's able to facilitate that sale and deal with a third-party servicer in that short amount of time. Sign number 2, seller is accepting backup offers, meaning they have marked, instead of marked pending on the MLS, this could be a possibility that it's marked pending. Don't rule it out if it's marked pending. But if it says active contingent status, that means that the offer they have ratified is contingent. condition. It has a contingency. So this contingency could be an appraisal contingency, loan contingency, inspection contingency. In the Bay Area, generally, we have an inspection contingency for a shorter amount of time, then an appraisal contingency, hopefully for a not much longer time, and then a loan contingency would be the longest final contingency. There are other types of contingencies, but those are the three main ones. If a seller has put active contingent as a status, it makes it a little bit more obvious that they'll probably take a backup offer. So backup position form is used. It means they're not confident this one's going to go through. They want to make sure they don't have to completely go back on market as they're in this escrow period. There's something about the offer they've received or the experience before receiving that offer or the condition of the house with the contingent offer that they have and the type of contingency that puts down in the seller's mind. Contract cancellation in Oakland alone rose from 6.3% to over 12% in December 2025. And that was the second largest increase in the metros of the United States that Redfin had analyzed. So it's interesting because I think that some factors there might have been contingencies and financing. People perhaps being a part of that layoff could have been, the writing was on the wall in terms of some areas of Oakland depreciating. And maybe, around the holiday time when people become budget sensitive. I'll look into this number more, but by contrast, across the bridge in San Francisco, contract cancellation was 3.7% around the same time period. That was among the lowest of any metro in the country. One thing I will note about a backup offer is those terms can already be defined. So it's not as if the prospect of the current offer falling out gives you leverage to change the terms. You can certainly withdraw your backup offer if you smell that something's going wrong. You might still be able to be put in backup position with a lower price, with another contingency, but it's often equally competitive as the offer, which is already in contract. All right, sign number one, there could be a whole history before desyndication when it comes to the seller, but it's taking the property off the market for at least 30 days and then relisting it. So the goal there with the seller and the listing agent is to make it appear as if this property has not been on the market before, that it's a new listing. You can refresh photos during that period, you can stage, you can make some interior aesthetic improvements that help with the marketability of the property during that time period. There were over 45,000 homes nationally that were taken off the market in 2025 and then relisted in January 2026. That's the most relisting that's happened since 2016. There were many homes in San Francisco that were listed in 2025, and some of them were kept on the market, but struggled in 2025, and then suddenly in 2026 get sold above the initial transparent or aspirational pricing. If you want to alert yourself to these changes, right, you might be favoriting specific properties in your buyer collaboration center or Real Scout, these other platforms in which you can set up your search as a buyer. Yeah, there's no red flag on Zillow or Redfin that says this was listed in 2024 and at this price and now it's relisted. So you can set up searches for those price changes. You can also set up the initial search for, days on market longer than 100 days. I am intrigued by some of the listings that have been on the market for over 180 days, were listed during one of the non-peak times in the season last year in San Francisco, but not relisted as a fresh listing. Well, now we're at the end of summer, but an ideal time would be mid-September, October for those listings. But letting a home just marinate, there's not going to be a whole lot of activity outside of folks who are hoping to lowball or investors who will see an opportunity to negotiate based on days on market. It's also noteworthy that sellers who have taken their home off the market have done some improvements, had made some monetary investment and now time investment in remarketing the property, have a lot of motivation to make sure that that home sells quickly. So they've got to follow the process because they didn't do it correctly the first time around, either in terms of pricing strategy, in terms of presentation with the staging, the aesthetic changes, and sometimes very rarely is the case now in San Francisco Bay Area, but market timing, like putting something on a week before Thanksgiving holiday is not ideal for a seller. Same thing is true for Christmas holidays or the December holidays. I didn't talk much about different asset types in this video, but the San Francisco condos are currently priced at their 2018-2019 listing prices. I don't think that the gap between single family home movement and San Francisco condo market will remain so wide. I don't think San Francisco condo sales will catch up or be nearly as competitive ever as the single family home market. Could be famous last words, but my point is applying some of these patterns to an already depreciated asset type. And if you're trying to get into the San Francisco market, some of these things like having the special assessments concessions, having the HOA transfer fees be covered by the seller, having an interest rate buy down credit from the seller might be good ways to get into these condo buildings that are currently at 2018, 2019 prices. And these signs are absolutely showing up in other parts of the Bay Area, 880 corridor, cities, Oakland, Berkeley, El Cerrito, Alameda, Albany. If you want help in identifying these signals and different asset types, or you want to set up a preliminary search for these specific signals, I'm happy to do that for you. Click the link below to book a call. If you're in the process of buying or selling right now and you want a consultation, contact information is also below. We can either build a clearer picture of what's available in your market right now, since inventory is a little bit lower at the end of summer. If you're prepping to sell in the fall, happy to walk you through some of the top things you should do for the highest ROI. You have a different asset type, whether you're in San Francisco or some of these secondary markets I've mentioned throughout this video. One thing that's so beautiful about the Bay Area, it is very different. The North Bay is very different from the Peninsula. The Peninsula is very different from the East Bay. So yeah, if you're trying to figure out which neighborhood actually fits your life, you envision for yourself living here, not just your budget, click on that link below for the quiz.